has happened a lot, something that we didn't expect in last 70 years. No one did. I mean, I have gone on record on August 4th, 2019, saying that Government of India will do everything but repeal Article 370. And this is me on record on August 4th. Obviously, August 5th, everything changed. Not only 35A was repealed, Article 370 was abrogated and the state was reorganized, something that had never occurred to anyone. Of course, for Article 370, a lot of people had, including myself, we had written about it and we had said that why it needs to go, it's time for Article 370 to go. But nobody had thought about the reorganization of state in that sense, even though people in Jammu had huge concerns and Ladakh had even bigger concerns because they had been totally dropped out of the mainstream conversation in Jammu and Kashmir, and they were nowhere to be seen in the mainstream conversation in Indian mainland. So what happened was, a lot of people say historic, but this is truly historic what happened. Since then, again, and I had written an essay right after that, and I had said that this is Article 370, repeal of Article 370 was just one reform. For it to work now, that was just a constitutional thing that they had to do. But in order to make sure that the full integration of Jammu and Kashmir happens with India, a series of more reforms need to be done. And those have been consistently happening. The domicile law, which a lot of people had issues with, but even then I said the domicile law was necessary because most states in Indian Union do have a domicile law, which requires that you have to be in a certain state for a few years to be considered a domicile of that state. But look at what has happened now. Earlier in Jammu and Kashmir, you had no chance of acquiring domicility. Versus if I live in Haryana for an X number of years, I will become a domicile of Haryana. Or if I live in Chennai, I'll become a domicile of Chennai. In Jammu and Kashmir, there was no such provision. You were a domicile if you were born there, and then if you had moved out of for some reason, even Kashmiris had a lot of trouble getting domicility. It was known as state subject certificate. It was, I know my mother had to go from pillar to post, even though I had lived in Kashmir. My family, my generations had lived in Kashmir, but we had to go from pillar to post to acquire one state subject. So it was that difficult for people living in Kashmir. Outsiders had no way of acquiring domicility. So what happened with the domicile law was that now anyone could acquire the domicility after staying in Kashmir for an X number of years. Of course, the number set was 15 years. That can change. Some people felt 15 years was too much, but that is, of course, those things can change. As I always say, now things don't require constitutional amendment in Kashmir. Things can change with a simple order. So people who feel 15 years is too much, they can obviously talk to the government and fix that, but that's a minor issue. So that happened. So with this, when this was increased, domicility was increased, the number of Kashmiri Hindus who had lived outside Kashmir for years, because remember the exodus that began in 1990, of which I am the victim, but before that, since 1947, people had been moving out. So they had no way of showing any proof of any residence in Kashmir. In 1947, where do you show any proof of residence? They automatically became domicile or state subjects if they could show that somebody, the grandparents or great grandparents, had lived in Kashmir or had some proof of residence there. So this automatically increased the state subjects or the domiciles in Kashmir. That was one fantastic thing that happened. Another thing that has just now happened was this land reform law. As everyone knows, that you could not acquire land in Jammu and Kashmir if you were an outsider. There was just no way. So what happened with the result was that the industry could not come in. Because why would the industry come in if you were going to give them this leased land, and then there's no incentive, and even that was very difficult. So now what the government of India has done, it has removed, not only has it made it easy for everyone to acquire land, outsiders also to acquire land, it has completely removed the domicile clause as well. So you don't even need to be a resident of 15 years. Because now if you're expecting business houses to have had something there for 15 years and then they can acquire a land, you are putting another stumbling block. So that clause was completely taken away. Of course, this is not acceptable, applicable to the agricultural land. That has a different thing. But for industrial land and for personal uses, now you can buy a land without any domicility clause. So this is humongous. People have no idea what this means for Jammu and Kashmir. This is literally opening up Jammu and Kashmir after 73 years to rest of the world. So this, and another important thing, and I will end after this, and we can come back to this in the conversations, is
sure.
In Jammu and Kashmir, for the army, everyone knows the nature of this border state and the terrorism that has infested Kashmir. For anything, for any government, for Indian army or security forces to acquire any land so that they could put a bunker or they could put a facility, a security facility or anything, they had to go via state government. And the state governments would never give them that, approval. So with the result, these security forces were left vulnerable because they were going pillar to post, trying to acquire a piece of land for themselves to put some strategic facilities or whatever they needed to do. That has been done away with. Now they do not require any permission. A commanding officer, I think that rank or something, can easily designate a spot which is required for security forces for whatever reason. They can acquire that bit of land and they don't need to go from pillar to post. Again, that is untying their hands because they were working with their one hand tied back. Right. So that's again a remarkable reform that has happened. So these are some of the things that I remember off the cuff, and once we start talking, we can talk about it more.